million souls, half the population of the United States, twice the population of Great Britain, in North India today that had never seen even a gospel tract and knew nothing of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Almighty God, open our eyes to the situation in the world today, and might we realize that it's a desperate one. It's an emergency situation. We know what happens today when a man has an automobile accident. It's an emergency. The sirens roar. The ambulance comes to pick up the wounded people. Telephone calls are made. People fly here, people fly there. Blood is given. We know what happens when there's a national emergency. The Red Cross moves in, the Boy Scouts move in, all different charity organizations move in. This past summer there was a national emergency in Yugoslavia. It was hard to believe, but 10,000 people perished in the earthquake in Sofia, Yugoslavia. And when that happened, the Army mobilized, the Red Cross mobilized, Boy Scouts were moved from Greece over into Yugoslavia to help. Thousands of pounds were sent from Great Britain and from other countries to help in this tremendous state of emergency. So it was in Iran not too long ago during the great earthquake. So it is whenever there's a great hurricane in America, or a great national windstorm, or a tidal wave in some country, a state of emergency is declared. That's why they have in certain countries what's called martial law, in which the country, during a state of emergency, can be completely taken over by the leader of the country. And martial law goes into effect, which means that leader of the country can do what he wants with factories and with business in order that the whole country might be aimed at conquering and winning during that national emergency. We've seen it in Great Britain. We've seen it in America. War is a state of emergency. And we see what happens during a war. Rationing, sleeping in the underground, having one's fence taken off the front of the yard that it might be melted down and used for war weapons. And so it is, whenever a state of emergency comes, there's mobilization. People begin to move. People begin to do something. People begin to take desperate action. People begin to do things that they would have never done under normal conditions. People begin to say things they would have never said. They go places they would have never gone. They'll sleep in conditions they never slept in. And they work hours that they would have never dreamed of working under normal conditions. The communists believe that they're working in a state of emergency. They believe that their situation is war. They believe that their situation is desperate. And a recent article, not so recent any longer, which I quote in my book on literature, Evangelism, states that the communists are winning in World War III because they believe they're in it. And what we call peace, they call war. And they're moving out in a fantastic way, educating thousands of young propagandists and taking the communist poison to the ends of the earth. So we see Cuba, and we see countries moving into the communist revolution, swept into this so-called warfare, this peacetime warfare that they carry on through bullets made of paper and ink. And men who are willing to dedicate themselves, who are willing to forget family and friends, who are willing to forget fame, who are willing to forget everything and bury themselves for an ideology. And when I read the life of Lenin and I read the life of Marx, it was like a knife in my side and a sword in my stomach as I saw their dedication and their fanaticism for the cause of communism. And great leaders like Billy Graham have said that the church is being challenged today like never before, for the communists have taken New Testament principles, dedication, discipline, propagation, and all of the rest to spread forth their poisoned doctrines. Oh, might we look at the world today and realize what the situation is at this very hour, right where you're sitting, right in that soft chair or that hard chair, right there on the floor, wherever you're sitting, wherever you're listening to this tape, wherever you're listening to my voice, you're in the midst of a crisis situation. You're in the midst of what I believe is best described as an all-out war. And might God whip us with it. And when He does, we'll never be the same. A man is not the same in war as he is in peace. There's all the difference between a peacetime soldier and a wartime soldier. There's all the difference in the world between a young man with a submachine gun on the front lines of a battlefield and the same soldier back in peacetime with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth with a nice young girl in his lap. All the difference in the world. Might we see what will happen to us as Christians when we realize that our situation today is war. When we look out at the lost and dying world, Suffering, yes, without bread, but worse than that, suffering without the gospel of Jesus Christ. We're going to do something. Oftentimes I've given the illustration, and I'll give it again, of what would happen if you and I had the medicine to save a group of people that were dying downtown in the city where we live. Just imagine if a report came back to us and we heard that there were 10,000 people dying of a dreaded disease in the center of our city. In our little cabinet, we had the medicine they needed. We had the vaccine, we had the serum, we had just what they needed to save them. But we said, well, I'm busy. Well, tonight I've got this activity and I have a date with Sally Q. And I have this and I have that. They can wait. Let's not get excited about the situation. Let's not go overboard. Let's not get unbalanced. Let's not rush into things. Let's take it easy. We need more training. We need this. We need that. And the 10,000 people pass into eternity and the medicine still stands in your cabinet. Now that's the most ridiculous story anyone could ever tell. Only an insane man would do that. Only an insane man would speak like that. Only a man who was not thinking reasonably or logically would think of such a thing. Any normal human being would immediately go to his medicine cabinet and mobilize and move out down the street to help those people. But what if you didn't have that medicine? But not far from you was a storage house. Not far from you was a storage house there. There were literally hundreds of pounds of medicine stored up. And you went down to the storage house. You knew about these dying people. And you went to the storage house. And you looked on the door. And on the door there was a fantastic little sign. And it says, ask, and ye shall receive. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. This was written above the door of this big storage house in which the medicine was contained that the world needed. Tell me, how much would you ask for? How much medicine would you ask for? Would you knock on that door? Would you seek? Would you ask? Well, of course you would. Any unsaved, unregenerate man would do that. And yet, this is just our situation today, young person. The world is dying. The remedy, the medicine they need is the gospel of Jesus Christ, the power of God unto salvation. And although sometimes we don't have much on our own shelf, and there doesn't seem to be much potential in us, and we seem to be weak, and we don't seem to really have all that it takes to go out and to meet this crisis situation, across from us and right in front of us, there's a huge storehouse. It's the storehouse of God's grace. It's the storehouse of God's mercy. It's the storehouse of God's love. And above the storehouse is a great sign. It says, ask and ye shall receive. Seek and ye shall find. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. But we go to the storehouse and we look. And because of unbelief, because we're self-seeking, because we're trapped into a self-centered life, and because we're mainly interested in ourselves, we fail to read the sign, and it's blurry and dim, and we're so interested in our own ways and our own plans and in our own projects, and we're so caught up into naturalistic thinking, and we're so caught up into the realm of unbelief and fear and murmuring and all of the things that kept the children of Israel out of the promised land, that we never enter into the warehouse, we never take hold of the promises of God, and they never become real to us. We read them. And the man comes to the warehouse door and he shows us a whole list of promises. He shows us promise after promise.